this is the first, I just popped up the first thing he wrote. This is from, there's actually a collection called But I Digress. So this is what it says. I must admit I'm a bit spoiled. Backtrack, people within the industry had been hearing the buzz, just as the press release says, about Image Comics for some weeks now. Hold on. For all people who asked about posting something so things would be a bit calm. Okay. A group of friends banding together to form their own business, friends in business. Now there's a volatile mix. I hope everyone's got good lawyers going over the contracts, which we find out that actually was needed as Todd McFarlane got tired of Rob Liefeld's tomfoolery and wanted to kick him out. And it wasn't just that they were creating their own titles. It's that to varying degrees, they were walking away from Marvel, citing an assortment of reasons, none of which was particularly flattering to that publisher. This is nothing new, of course. Any number of creators have become disenchanted with one or both of the big two and moved either to already existing independents or self-publishing. That's where the part about my being spoiled comes in. Creators such as Wendy and Richard Pini, or Frank Miller, Alan Moore, Dave Sims, these are people with talent and vision whose muses have produced titles whose subject matters does not fit within the Marvel and DC universes. Alan Moore did not cite disgust with DC business practices and go off to develop a new character called Muck Monster. He did big numbers. The Pennies had so much confidence in their elves that they were driven to produce ElfQuest themselves, which thrives to this day, while Marvel's own take on elves, Weird World, vanished without a trace decades ago, although ElfQuest did end up at Marvel. That's Marvel's imprint later. Okay, it does say that.
Which I mean, good for Marvel for acquiring it.
And once again, this is Peter David's very first article about Image, and these are some of the most fun in my opinion. So when a creator boldly announces that he's off to start his or her own line, my presumption and hope is that it's going to be something new and visionary. It doesn't have to be highly marketable. Indeed, Marvel and DC's main flaw is that titles are expected to draw significantly higher sales than an independent would reasonably expect for his piece of the market pie. So Hard Boiled doesn't have to sell like X-Men, and no one expects it to. But even the independents back in the 80s would outsell a title, a mainstream title today. That is one thing.
It's sad. It's so sad. And they entirely did it to themselves. They could have ridden synergy with the movies right to the bank. Yep. It stuns and depresses me how thoroughly they snatched defeat from the Godzilla-sized jaws of victory there.
So Peter David goes on to say, if Todd said, I've been dying to do a romance comic, I'd be thrilled. If Eric said, my life's goal is to produce a solid Western, I'd be impressed. So what's Image Publishing? Superheroes. Young superheroes, SWAT team superheroes, young freelance superheroes, a group of superheroes. I mean, haven't we got Marvel and DC for that? Why have X-Force clones when we've got X-Force?
Okay, I'm of two minds on this, because on the one hand, I would like to see a world where you didn't have to make your own cape in order to make things work. You could just tell good stories with already established characters. However, I also don't want the big two to have the entire monopoly on superhero comics.
Well, the flaw in this particular cloth that Peter David is writing up, that some of the greatest books of the 1980s were Miracle Man, The Eternals, and the D and Agents, which were independent takes on superheroes. So
yeah. And let's not. This is the other half of why I think this rubs me the wrong way. Based on what he just said there, it sounds as though he thinks that superhero comics are beneath him or something, and that's some bullshit.
Most definitely.
Definitely bullcrap.
You can't credit that to Peter David, because Peter David is the original guy, not Jeff Johns. What did I say there, Eric? DNA agents, element. What did I say instead of elementals? You know what?
You said Eternals. I was also confused there for a second, but I assumed.
Wait a minute. You meant to say Elementals by Bill Willingham.
Here we go. We're moving this over to Peter David. I am sending Eric the link here. All right, Eric. I sent it to your Twitter feed there, sir.
Yeah. I'm not saying that Peter did think that or does think that. Certainly, I'm just saying, out of context of who Peter David is, the way that was written made it sound like superhero comics are. It kind of like how modern day directors will poo-poo the shit out of blockbusters. That vaguely sounds like what's going on here.
Well, that's been going on.
Even if it wasn't intended that way.
I remember taking film class in the 90s, and there were just freaking hoity-toity people there. Like, oh, Independence Day is so
the art house cancer that has basically consumed the entire industry on both.
There's a whole bunch of independent films that are trash for a much smaller budget. That's all. That's the only thing. Hey, Eric, what's up?
Hey, Eric.
What's up, Dom?
We were chatting.
Very well.
We're chatting, and I decided let's go the next hour on our 45-minute goodbye, and started talking about Peter David. So why not? And I thought go through a couple of his "But I Digress" articles. Did you ever read these in the Comics Buyer's Guide?
No.
Oh man, I was addicted to this shit. When he put out the book of them, I was like, yep, that's for me. I read that thing dog-eared. So he says, I haven't seen them yet, of course. Perhaps there will be some startling vision that makes us see superheroes in a new way we've never seen them before. It's possible. After all, not all superheroes are alike. New Warriors and the Watchmen are nominally both about super teams, but are just a tad different in tone and style.
Well, just a bit, and also with the benefit of hindsight, Spawn, Invincible, obviously, and several other image-related superheroes did eventually make their mark.
Invincible was 10 or 12 years away from the creation of Image. True,
but I'm just saying, we do, in fact, live in 2025, and therefore we can confirm with hindsight that, yes, several Image IPs did, in fact, reinvent superheroes in interesting ways that you probably couldn't have gotten away with in Marvel and DC.
Well, I wouldn't go even so far to say that all of the Image, the original Image stuff was bad. I always tout Wildstar. I think that was pretty good.
That's a good one.
Well, okay, the Indian one by Mike Grell. Eric, do y'all remember that one?
Oh yeah, Shaman's Tears.
Shaman's Tears. Yeah, that was one
that
I
remember correctly. No, it was Maggie the Cat that he quit after 2 issues. Never mind.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I remember Shaman's Tears, and there was also Tribe that was done by Stroman, who was the artist that worked on Peter David's run on X Factor.
Yeah, and that was one issue though. That was solid.
But it was one issue, but then Stroman and the writer like moved Tribe to a different independent publisher called
Image. Turned out to be a garbage fire of a company because they just would not get books out in time.
On time, which again, like even like the founders like admitted that with hindsight they should have like brought in like the objectively talented and best writers for the job with them in the formation of Image Comics. That way they would actually their ideas would have been more fine-tuned.
And they wouldn't have sold nearly as well.
Maybe.
I'll say that right now because here's my argument.
Okay.
The early 90s, it was all about the art. It was style over substance. They all left Marvel. They started their own gig. They wrote their own stuff. The books were simple, pretty, and cotton candy entertainment. Fast forward about 6 or 7 years, when they did bring in actual writers, when Wildstorm split off, when you had Grant Morrison, Robbie Morrison, Alan Moore, Ed Brubaker, etc. James Robinson. They didn't sell shit. Now, by that time the bloom was off the rose and people had moved on. but they didn't come back. The art was still there, but now they had great writing to go with it, and they sold a fraction of what those early issues of like Youngblood and Wildcat.
That being said, some of that blame actually should probably go to the writers themselves, because I've been noticing this looking back at, you know, that period in the 90s that I like so much. Even though Neil Gaiman in the, you know, in his original run of Sandman was a much better writer than he is now, and even though he's a lot less politically warped than he is now, the seeds of what would eventually become his ego outstripping his talent were always there. Same thing with Alan Moore. Same thing with Grant Morrison. As much as we love that period in the 90s, we're just gonna have to face facts, kids. Some of the best ideas that happened in the British invasion basically happened by accident because it wasn't the original artist vision, TM. This is why I don't. This is one of the examples of why I don't think that artistic vision is a panacea. Just like your terrestrial vision can be bad and needs an optometrist, sometimes your artistic vision is also bad, and you might benefit from someone else's input or having to change things due to circumstance.
Okay, I'm going to move on the article. I want the last word here just to say that also I blame the buyers, the readers. And like Eric said, it was style over substance. It was almost like these days collectors are talking more about the cover than what's inside the book.
I'll let you get the last word, and after I get the second to last word in.
Okay, go ahead.
You know, I mean, I can't prove this one way or another, but I can cite as an example. There's a reason why 2 million people watch The Wire and 15 million people watched CSI Peoria.
And 50 million watched The Real Housewives.
Right. It's because I said the disposable entertainment has always garnered a larger audience than substantive entertainment.
One thing I was going to mention was that Image at one point in time was selling out over DC. DC was, inarguably better than Marvel and Image as far as the writing was concerned. You might find a title that was better than a title as far as Marvel versus DC.
But DC was experiencing a golden period at that
overall.
At that time.
DC was just leaps and bounds, and DC was failing compared to the other two, to the point where people were wondering if Marvel was going to buy. But that kind of thing had been going on since.
Yeah, but then 2 years later, who's selling characters to Image?
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so it goes, can we get any idea in advance of publication as to whether the creators involved can pull it off based on their previous work, judging from their own press releases? No, we can't get an idea. Why? Because of the rather alarming sentiment voiced by both Rob Liefeld and Eric Larson. And let me make it clear that I like both guys personally. It's what's said in the press release that I'm reacting to. I think that in many ways, says Eric, we've been holding back. Most of our best creations have yet to be seen and will be seen under the Image imprint for a time. Excuse me, holding back? Am I the only one stunned by this comment? If you're unimpressed by Eric's recent work, don't worry. If you can barely remember such characters as his Shrapnel or Take Heart, it has nothing to do with lack of ability or talent. By his own admission, Eric's just been dogging it. Holding back, as he says, withholding his full imagination until a better opportunity came along.
Peter makes an excellent point, and I just want to add, again, with the benefit of 2025 hindsight, this problem has only gotten worse because of Twitter.
Yeah.
the problem of creatives putting their foot perpetually in their mouth, so much so that it ruins their entire career, has only gotten worse because of social media.
Unless I'm inferring incorrectly here, the concept that fans are plunking down good money while figuring that a creator is giving it his all every time out doesn't factor in, oh, this villain I just thought up is too good for Marvel. Marvel readers all hold back. Rob echoes the sentiments. The release states that Rob confirmed that his enthusiasm for the new line of comics has him bursting at the seams. What a concept, Rob. Are you bursting at the seams? Why, yes, I am. Thanks for asking. These 501s are tight, referencing his jeans commercial directed by Spike Lee. And Rob goes on to add, not only do we get to share with the fandom our finest creations, but we get to own them as well. What better incentive to do your best work? Well, gee, let me think. Pride and workmanship, commitment to a creative idea. Are the retailers and fans who bought millions of copies of X-Force being told that their support was insufficient incentive?
Thank you, Peter, because I was just about to go on an explosive tirade about, no, you shouldn't be obsessing over owning them, you prats. If you have better ideas, find ways to work them in. And if you don't, then it is very much because your own ego is getting in the way. Hence what I was saying earlier about the seeds of the egotism that would eventually consume the industry apparently was always there.
Big ass serious but, as Eric has pointed out, as we have seen, modern day writers do not create characters for Marvel and DC. If they don't create a character, they'll recreate. They'll do a new Green Lantern. They'll make Iron Man Riri Williams. They will do a take on a popular character rather than create anything new until they go to self-publishing. So this particular thing is now not only been shifted over to something that is not seen as bad, but it's actually been encouraged. Let me move on. It says, it gives me the same queasy feeling that I get when I see one of those detergent commercials, wherein the woman X says to woman Y, well, how can you be still using Day-Glo on your clothes? Don't you know about Day-Go Plus? Oh, wait, whoa, that sounds Italian. And she proceeds to tell us how wonderful the news is in the comparison to the old and clearly inferior product, which makes you wonder why, if the original product wasn't all that hot, you were even buying in the first place. You feel like a fool because you supported the initial detergent, and you start wondering if you're simply being taken to the cleaners. Yeah. Hello to Jay Lucian as well.
Let me know when I can interrupt.
So go ahead. Go ahead. Jump in.
Yeah, now in a debate, I completely understand and support what Peter David was saying. However, that was the timing of that, which unfortunately for Peter David was terrible, because Liefeld and the people at Image were speaking from a position of absolute strength, because they were, if they held off their ideas and took them over to Image in the early 90s, when you could piss on a piece of paper and put an Image logo on it and sell, 1 million copies. That's why in 2025, those guys are living comfortably, and Peter David died destitute, because he spent his life, put his blood, sweat, and tears into two companies that just don't care about the people.
But now, I mean, that's part of the reason. That's part of the reason we're doing this. This article has demonstrated to me that at least at the time, he may have lost his touch later, just like everybody else, but at least at the time he wrote this, I could have had a meaningful conversation with Peter David. If we could take the Peter David from the time this was written and use time travel to bring him into the future of now, if he published an article like this about Social Justice era Marvel and DC, we wouldn't have needed to be YouTubers in the way we were YouTubers, folks.
I would like to point out,
if he was actually exposed, like how the egotism and everything else that we mentioned earlier would lead the industry into a downward spiral. It would have caused him to change his mind on things, and would have actually honestly prevented him possibly of not going into the side of leftism and actually remained a classical liberal, but becomes more moderate. You know what I mean?
We can but hope, but time travel notwithstanding, and I guess in this case necromancy and time travel notwithstanding, we won't ever know, I suppose.
I don't think Peter David ever went, so far left that you couldn't reach him. I can remember after Charlottesville, when everybody was just crying out to silence any conservative voice they could, Peter David said, "I don't want anybody silenced. I want to know what people around me are thinking."
Okay, well, in that case, fair enough. I don't know much about his modern takes, so if he had good takes like that, then fair enough. I just know that people I would have thought would have been smarter, like Neil Gaiman, like Grant Morrison, have lost every plot they have ever had, and then some.
Yeah,
but go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was just gonna say real quick that the argument that Peter David was making then would have been put to way better use in the 21st century, because now it doesn't matter what you're saving your good ideas for. In the 21st century, if your name isn't Robert Kirkman, you didn't get rich off of them. So that ship has also sailed.
Also, in the 21st century, there's a next to 0% chance that if you ever had a good artistic idea, the art schools haven't completely and utterly Stepfordized you and deprogrammed you and turned you into a themes and politics and morality over literally everything drone.
Jay's saying comics will break your heart, kid. Kirby.
God, Peter David should have, in a perfect world, he would have made so much more money producing all the great work that he did. And unfortunately, his creator-owned stuff just did not take off.
Artful Dodger, by the way, is good. I highly recommend it. It's an independent book. Maybe sometime this week we'll do a tier list of storylines, like I mentioned I would like to. So let's see. You're laughing. Did you not read Artful Dodger, or did you not like it? Oh, I thought I heard Don.
Yeah, no. It wasn't you. It wasn't you. It was something else. But Artful Dodger, I do remember reading years ago.
Yeah, it was a few years back. All right. The article goes on to say, I keep trying to determine what the guys might actually mean rather than what they're saying. Perhaps they mean the pride of ownership is what they take as the greatest joy in. But again, here's where my selfish viewpoint kicks in. I happen to think that some of the finest creations, purely in terms of merit and the effect they had on the audience, are works of involving characters I did not create. So it saddens me a bit to see the guys seem to feel that lack of ownership is a stumbling block to full pride in their work. But as you pointed out, they are rich and living high off the hog of the movies, and Peter David just died poor.
Well, and as I pointed out earlier, that is pure egoism. If that is the difference, if the difference between you phoning it in and you giving it your all is, well, it won't glorify my name and my legacy and my ego, then you are a hack, no matter how talented you are. You are a philosophical hack, is what I mean.
I would like to point out that there was one member of ComicsGate who did not go off and exploit, and he is now struggling doing auctions every week. So there is
you die a hero, or you live long enough to see yourself become the villain.
So he goes on, or perhaps it's just all hype, the same way Stan Lee would say, Marvel Comics is the greatest work since Bill Shakespeare discovered the pen. Now, does Stan really truly believe that Lee, Kirby, Thor, or FF is as good as they were on par with, say, Hamlet? I tend to doubt it. I doubt anyone really thinks Stan believes that, but quality hype is stuff that's so over the top that you know to take it with a grain of salt. Furthermore, quality hype should not denigrate the previous work of those people whose work you're now trying to sell. Those fans and retailers being offered a chance to get in on the ground floor of an exciting new comic universe thought that they were doing that when they bought into the newly revitalized Marvel Mutant Universe or the new Spider-Man title, and are now being told that the creators themselves don't consider that to be reflective of their best efforts. And speaking of Stan and Jack, I can't pass up Eric's claim that Image is the most exciting thing to happen to comics since the creation of the Marvel Universe. So honestly, Eric, Has it occurred to you that if Stan and Jack and Steve had been likewise holding back, there wouldn't have been a Marvel universe?
Yeah, there wouldn't have been a Marvel in the first place.
Enjoy? Yeah.
But creator-owned didn't exist then, and you couldn't even get your art back.
That is,
hell,
that was very much, hold on, that was very much put on display with Jack Kirby, and a lot of Jack Kirby interviews talking about how Marvel not only refused to give him his art back, but they refused to pay him for art that was being used in posters and fan clubs and all sorts of advertisements.
Yeah, but like I said, in those days, that was your job, and your job you did to the best of your ability, or someone else was doing it Monday morning. So like I said, that's a tough comparison to make because it was a completely different landscape. And it was the way those guys were shit on that led to the landscape that these guys were able to do what Eric Larson was saying.
Yeah.
But to E's point though, imagine if Siegel and Schuster had been holding back because no one wanted to publish the first Superman. We wouldn't have a superhero comics industry in the way we do.
Right, but holding back for what? Like, so when these guys say they're holding back, we're not giving it to Marvel. We're going to do it ourselves, where we get the
because
money.
My ego, you have to deify me and my genius, Dirk.
It's also I want to pay my next round of bills.
Yeah, that, by the way, was what caused a lot of problems for Jack Kirby, because Jack Kirby was a child of the Depression. He ended up helping his family more than his father did through his artwork. And he had always been afraid to lose that paycheck and everything. Jack Kirby did not know who he was until the 80s. Jack Kirby thought he was a pay-for-play player all throughout, to the point where DC Comics treated him like shit. When he went back to Marvel, they didn't treat him much better. I mean, this is Jack Kirby. And he's a member of, Jack the King Kirby. And they just didn't treat him. Now, the writers and artists that he was working with treated him with respect. They were fans of his, but the editors and such, they saw that they could steamroll Kirby because he was always afraid that the last meal he had would have been the last meal he had, because that's how he grew up. It always, the Depression really did Jack Kirby in. He was a great artist. He was a poor businessman.
Well, but that seems to be a motif that repeats itself over and over again with artists. You either have artists who slave away and give it their all, regardless of the fact that they go unappreciated, and then they become appreciated posthumously. And then you have the Edison types who do know how to work the room, and as a result, they can frequently get away with crap that's subpar just because they know how to work the room a little bit better.
All right, let's continue here. He says, but you can point out that people like Jack Kirby, Steve Ditko did their best work for Marvel, and Siegel and Schuster for DC, and have not shared proportionately in the monies generated by their creations. You would be correct. The troubles of the various creators in those instances and many others have been well documented. No one covered themselves with glory. On the other hand, creators complained about perfectly legitimate deals that, with 2020 hindsight, they wish they hadn't made. They wanted a bigger piece of the pie to which they were legally entitled. On the other hand, corporations came across as heartless, inconsiderate, boorish, and ungrateful to the people whose imaginations created the six-figure incomes some executives enjoy, the millions of dollars in licensing fees filling the company coffers. And it used to be that the only business considerations of comics were held by publishers. No more. We have a readership base that is made up in large measure of people who see comics not as the entertainment, but as investments. And it would seem that we are also developing a creative base that is wising up, as it were. Who owns the story is becoming as great, if not greater, a consideration than what the story is actually about. If Rob said, I'm planning to do a series about a team of hermaphrodite bisexuals, and in the first issue they go back in time and discover Jesus was a vampire, my feelings would be, yep, that sure wouldn't have flown with the big two. But there's no discussion of subject matter that would have run afoul of corporate standards. Instead, the release talks about crossover storylines, team-ups in a shared universe, all stuff that's not only SOP at Marvel and DC, but occasionally gets flack over being a mere marketing ploy. Instead, the main reason that the guys seem excited, according to the release, is that they own the characters themselves. And if there's money to be made with those same filthy business considerations that people use to castigate Marvel and DC, then by gosh, the guys are going to make that same money.
aside from anything else, before we move on, I want to read that story that he is suggesting.
I know, right?
I would read the crap out of that, and it would be glorious.
Yeah. Goodness gracious. I just realized how long the article is here. Wow, I did not remember that. Dom, are you still here?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Okay, you're kind of quiet on the subject.
No, I'm just listening in, that's all.
Oh, okay. I just wanted to make sure, because I know, as Eric said, when can I jump in? So by all means, anytime you want, just
no, you're good.
Yeah.
Well, listening in and reading the article is enlightening of what like Mr. David what he was witnessing at that time period, and also like expressing his honest opinions like on things. Yet, yeah, like there is a sense of a cruel irony, because it ended up biting him in the butt. Because if he did actually go independent like earlier to like working like at Image and other recognizable publishers such as, like, for example, Valiant, then he wouldn't like dive in destitute to like when it happened yesterday. He would have actually wouldn't have to struggle in like paying like the bills and everything on.
Undead Quinn, I know it does, but that's the problem. That's where the we hate the audience, we hate the IP, we hate anything that isn't socio-political and moral themes crap came from in the first place. In other words, it's what drove Alan Moore bat crap insane and turned him into a violent anarcho-communist before Antifa was really a thing.
Yeah, and also like what some people tend to forget is like after what he did with Miracle Man, his run on Swamp Thing, and Watchmen, like he did worse like in the 90s, like from Promethea top 10, then to even his run on Supreme, just to give several examples, including 1963 when he was at Image, and he was playing the archetypes and tropes surrounding cape fiction straight, which showcased that no, he loves cape fiction, but also it serves as an apology, because like when he did those series, like they were not meant to be like the next, like the new standard of writing cape fiction.
Yeah, although I will say I will push back a little bit on Promethea, because he explicitly wrote that in order to try and cause the apocalypse. And as a magical practitioner, I find that incredibly unethical. And screw you, Alan Moore, for writing a story specifically to try and create the circumstances that lead to the apocalypse. Thank you. I know you were going for the Greek conception of apocalypse, i.e., a revealing of truth, but you also ended up creating the circumstances that might eventually lead to the other kind of apocalypse, and therefore screw you, Alan Moore.
All right, so it says, where do we go? Okay, here it is. Malibu. Publisher
said the Florida native also.
Well, that's in California. Discusses the business end of the press release, stating that the deal, in addition to creative freedom, provides better earning potential for artists and writers than ever before. Malibu is proud and privileged to help pioneer this new relationship from which the creators will clearly profit as much as the publisher company. Profit indeed. Sources that said that Malibu was offering Image anywhere from 70 to 95% of the line's net profit. In a separate conversation, Dave confirmed that the numbers were indeed in that neck of the woods. Now, Eddie Murphy has commented, not to me, mind you, meaning Peter David, that an offer of sharing in net profits is a monkey deal, meaning you have to be as dumb as a monkey, putting aside that an infinite number of monkeys working for an infinite period could produce the works of Shakespeare, although probably not an issue of Thor, so maybe Stanley was right. Let's see. Point Murphy was making is that net means nothing. Gross is where the action is, and numbers can be crunched very easily. So that when it comes time for the net profits, you wind up with nada. Hollywood bookkeeping is legendary for this. Remember that Coming to America, one of Paramount's biggest summer hits, was still in the red when Art Buchwald won his lawsuit. Now, David Olbrich, however, promises better things for Image. I'm thinking in the long term, he says, although obviously a few months of non-existent net profits would benefit Malibu, it would most probably alienate Image. And Olbrich pointed out, when you do things in the long-term perspective, you have to keep in mind there's no long-term profit in violating trust. It would be nice if modern companies had done that. I mean, we're hearing all over the place about unpaid artists and writers, people who have done the work, and now it's time for Marvel and DC to pony up, and they're just not being paid for.
Well, that's
the sad like the matter of it's all the matter of like there's of the like not well refined like mentorship programs, as well as like the editorial actually training and like the young bloods. Let's be like the writing editorial, even like the art editors help these guys to actually refine their craft, kind of like place them in smaller titles and see if they got what it takes to graduate to the big leagues.
Yeah, that was one of modern day comics' biggest mistakes. They assumed that the art schools could do what the in-house mentors couldn't, and that's why modern day comics is lousy with a bunch of art school schlock that ruins everything it touches.
All right. Eric, anything to add before we move on?
No, I just kind of half watching the game, half pay attention to this, waiting for us to start talking about his works and not his grievances.
Oh, okay. Well, I was just doing this article. I am more than happy to do that. I was talking about maybe doing that as a tier list or something, because I really would. I just brought up this article, and I brought it up as an Image versus Peter David, and just thought it would be good to go through, because I am a big fan of his But I Digress parts. So
it's amazingly written as well. I curse that we lost this kind of economy of language and this kind of structure of sentences and shit.
Mm-hmm.
Like modern day writers do not know how to write like a person with an above room temperature IQ.
All right, so I will skip down, and we can thusly
the conclusion.
Yeah. Let's see. He did have a few things here. I'm left then with only a couple of final thoughts. First, I can't wait to see what happens if one of the creators of a falling out with the other guys and wants to take his character over to, say, Dark Horse. Can he guest star characters he helped co-create for Image? What happens to licensing particular? Well, now we discovered.
Boy, that was prescient.
Yeah, because that happened with damn near everybody.
In the space of about 5 minutes after it started.
Yeah. Secondly, Image is going to boil down to the question of what's really selling. Is it the specific creators, or is it the actual books that the creators are on? It seems the guys are attentive to the monetary bottom line. If that's a major consideration, then what's going to generate more money in the long run for Rob Liefeld, X-Force, which he doesn't own, or Youngblood, which he does, which will bring in more royalties? Spider-Man.
Actually, he doesn't.
Not anymore, right? With the Marvel titles, they're backed up by 30 years of Marvel aggressively cultivating an audience-based distribution, promotion, marketing, and editorial power, all of which helped push the masterminds of Image to the forefront of fan attention. But fan attention is notoriously fickle. They'll be counting on that self-same audience base to support their solo efforts without a benefit of one of the big two pushing it. But it ends up, what do you want to get? $100 or 10% of 1,000? You know, Marvel may be pushing, but they would be taking as well.
Well, and of course, the thing that even Peter appears to be ignoring, which is people don't always gravitate to writers. They gravitate to characters, to the IP, to the fandom. And my God, would it be nice if people today would learn that it's the characters and the stories and the IP that's being told, you morons.
So he continues to agree to a degree. The image now as a skier, I see as a skier hitting the upward ramp of a jump, hurled upward into the air by forces of which he is only a part. He glories in the freedom that is his, and then he looks down. The question is whether Image is going to wind up looking like Jean-Claude Killy or the guy who tumbles ass over T-Kel at the beginning of Wide World of Sports.
So, man,
a little bit of both, as it turned out.
Are you going to be the thrill of victory or the agony
of defeat? Yep. As always, the fans will be the ultimate arbiters of that. Will the fans follow their faves, or will it be like the movie actor who leaves Hollywood, goes to Broadway for years, wins a Tony Award, only to return to Hollywood and discover that, as far as everyone else is concerned, he's dropped off the face of the earth for 12 months thus far. It seems as if Marvel and DC are Hollywood, and if you're not working there, then to many fans, you're out of work.
The answer to both of those questions is yes to both, I think.
And he says, I am certainly hoping they succeed. Any guys who are nervy enough to go head-to-head against the big two in precisely the same genre that Marvel and DC had a hammerlock on for 3 decades certainly deserves the best wishes of anyone in a creative endeavor. It's been a long time since Marvel and DC had any serious competition from anyone other than each other. I will be very interested to see whether Image develops into a portrait or a silhouette. And I agree. I think it kind of went both ways. I mean, look, Savage Dragon is still being published today, and no one gives a fuck.
Even though it's not what it was.
Except for up somewhere.
No, well, yeah, it's definitely not what it was. Spawn is the only one that seems consistent, and Spawn wasn't consistent constantly, because as we've talked about with the auctions, what was it, from 100 to 200 is rare. Nobody was buying them. Orders were way down.
You wish you owned them.
I know, right?
No, these guys are, the Image guys, the ones that are doing well to this day, I'm assuming because they invested well, because, I mean, you notice none of their characters have been in movies.
Nope.
Very few have been in live action of any kind, or even cartoons. But they sold so freaking much that if they didn't have Don King managing their money, they did really well.
Yeah.
Now, it's a shame that, it's a shame that Peter David never lucked into something like that, because he certainly had more talent than anybody that went to Image.
Yeah. That is absolutely true. Until the writers showed up. Yeah.
And then I would still argue that he did, because I'll put him as a comic book writer. I'll put him up against anybody as Alan Moore. But look at Peter David's body of work, the totality of it, versus Alan Moore.
Alan had a few examples where, by honestly sheer accident, he wound up accidentally creating something really amazing, whereas Peter David appeared to have consistent quality no matter what he was working on, partly due to that very same work ethic he mentioned at the top there, where it's like, I am doing a job, but I'm also creating art and attempting to create meaningful stories for people, which again, I, for one, support the person who goes, it's not about me. It's not about the glory of my ego and my legacy and my this and my that. It's about, am I creating something that's worth creating? And am I reaching an audience that actually appreciates me doing so?
Well, a little of both wouldn't hurt, because I said you hate to see somebody that did so much good work, his life end the way it did, as far as being damn near destitute. Yeah,
and unfortunately, that seems to be, like I say, a motif that repeated a lot. There were some people who had more talent in their right pinky finger than entire swathes of anonymous nobodies. And then you had one person who wasn't particularly remarkable, but was good at reading the room. And so it was the guy who was good at reading the room, the guy who was good at editing, that people gravitated to.
I'm going to guess the main problem with Peter Davis, he must have had a shitty divorce lawyer.
Yeah, probably.
I mean, because he got. Is that one of the reasons why he got taken off of the Hulk? Was he was going through a divorce and he was making it a little bit darker than it needed to be. I always thought it was an editorial edict. Apparently not.
I thought so
They
too.
killed Betty. And so I said it's got a little bit too dark for their taste. But